I recently took to social media and asked people, what frustrates you in professional emails? Within an hour, I had hundreds of comments and stories about workplace problems that involved emails. People respond passionately when they receive emails that don't follow certain principles of business communication and email etiquette. Because the truth is, your emails are tied to your professional brand. I'm Dr. Daisy Lovelace. I'm a business school professor and corporate consultant. If you want to make sure your emails present you in the best possible light, join me for some quick tips on LinkedIn Learning. Before starting a new message, you should ask yourself some fundamental questions. Why am I writing this email, and who needs to read it? When you open a new message, the first line you're asked to fill in is the recipient. This is usually followed by the carbon copy or CC line. Let's take a minute to talk about both. The to line is for whomever you're directly in conversation with in your message. To help you visualize this, pretend you're sitting at a table with a group of people. You might be in conversation with just one person, but if you're speaking at a conversational tone, others at the table will hear what you say too. The people you list in the to line are those you're expecting to respond to your message because the purpose for writing the email involves them. Those you carbon copy are the people you want to be aware of what you're sharing, but don't need to join into the conversation. Back to our example, you wouldn't share something with someone sitting across the table from you that you weren't comfortable with others around the table hearing. It would also be rude to carry on with someone one-on-one while others at the table have no reason to engage in the discussion. The same is true for an email message. Strategically select the people you carbon copy on your emails. The people in this line should have a clear business purpose for being included in the email, even though they're not expected to respond to the message. You're including them for visibility because they have something pertinent they may want to add to the conversation. But the carbon copy function can be tricky. I'll admit, it can be tempting to send someone a reminder and carbon copy their boss. But this comes across as passive-aggressive, or sometimes even blatantly aggressive. Check your intentions before you copy someone on your email. This strategy can backfire, especially if it looks like you're trying to cover for yourself or tattle on someone else. It may get you the results you need in that moment, but it could hurt your reputation in the long run. Including the right people in your email communication is critical. Take a few moments to think through your distribution list to ensure you're speaking to the right people for the purpose behind each message. Just because we can send emails 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, doesn't mean that we should. When sending messages, try to be considerate of the recipient when it comes to the timing of your email message. I was sitting on the beach next to a person who was glued to her tablet during spring break. She was clearly frustrated that her colleagues kept emailing her during her vacation. I couldn't help but think, man, I'm really grateful I left my phone in my room. It was clear she didn't appreciate all of the interruptions. When it comes to timing your messages, try to be considerate of the recipient. Late night emails or messages sent while people are away from the office can give your colleagues anxiety. Now, of course, there are times when this is unavoidable. But if you're generally a person who's considerate about the timing of your emails, your colleagues will be more understanding of the occasional late night or holiday email. One way you can manage this is to set a time for your message to be sent. So, if you happen to be awake and working at 2 in the morning, your colleagues won't get your message until later when the business day has started. I think of this as a win-win scenario. You get to cross this email off of your to-do list, and your coworker receives your message during regular business hours. Try to show courtesy and respect for your colleagues' time away from the office. For those away on leave or vacation, getting messages from the office can be stressful. They may need to receive messages that are sent to large groups, but try to avoid sending direct messages to people who are away for personal reasons, unless you absolutely have to. Finally, give people a reasonable amount of time to respond to your message. I once had a colleague who would call or or stop by my office a couple of hours after sending me an email to confirm I received the message. It felt aggressive. If you need something quickly, make sure you indicate it in the subject line. It's fine to provide a little nudge if you don't hear back in a time frame that seems reasonable. I generally follow up if I haven't heard back in 3 business days. Of course, this depends on my relationship with the other person and how quickly I need a response. But don't push it. Show consideration for your recipient's time, and you're more likely to get the response you want. Picture this. Your team receives an email from your manager, Serena, reminding several of your teammates that they're behind on their monthly reports. The tone on our email is friendly. Both teammates write back explaining their situations. One is waiting for a client contract, the other is traveling. The situation seems straightforward and reasonable. No big deal. But then, Serena's boss, the vice president of the company, responds to the same email thread. Suddenly, it's clear that Serena blind copied her boss on the message. Your teammates feel betrayed, and you're also wondering why she sent this note behind your backs. Using the BCC feature on emails can be dangerous. Now everyone on your team is questioning Serena's motives. Why did she privately copy her boss? Does the boss know there were legitimate reasons for your 2 teammates to be running late? As you can see, blind copied emails raise questions you don't want people asking. They give people a reason to question if they can trust you, which is the last thing you want tied to your professional reputation. They can also come across as manipulative and may put those who are blind copied in an awkward position. If you receive a BCC'd message, are you supposed to pretend you don't know the information? Act surprised when you hear it? This is all just messy. Serena may have legitimately needed to loop her boss in on the message. She can keep her boss informed by simply forwarding the initial message. Sure, it's an extra step to write FYI on the subject and forward the message once you've already sent it. But the seconds you spend on this step can save you hours of agony down the line. Now, there are scenarios when using BCC makes sense strategically. For example, you can blind copy yourself so that you can easily find a message that you want to keep in your inbox or save in a folder. Obviously, messages get saved in the sent folder, so this is purely for your convenience. You can blind copy an entire list to get information to a group of people without worrying that the list will be abused or that the recipients will receive a bunch of follow-up emails. Years ago, I coordinated a large event involving celebrities and elected officials who did not publicly share their email addresses. I would have damaged my reputation with this group if I sent messages that disclosed their private email addresses. Instead, I sent updates and logistical information to a list of BCC recipients. If anyone mistakenly hit reply all, the message would only come to me and my team who was carbon copied. So, the blind carbon copy function has its purpose, but as a general rule, I say beware the BCC. Picture this. You've just received a message that your boss has accepted a position at another firm. The email was sent to the entire company. Within minutes, you have 42 new messages in your inbox. Most of these are congratulatory with well wishes. These senders have all committed the email faux pas of hitting reply all. We all dread these messages. People routinely overuse reply all when they should instead simply hit reply or forward the message to the specific audience they want to address. You want to avoid being a chronic reply all responder. It annoys everyone on the email chain. And if people regularly see your name associated with emails they didn't need to receive, they start getting comfortable ignoring your messages. Another reason to avoid this is you can put your colleagues in an awkward position. If most of the team has responded to an email on the thread, this leaves the non-responders wondering, do they need to also? just to show their support and participation in the email discussion? This clutters everyone's inbox. And the team gets annoyed with both the originator of the message and everyone who participated in the back and forth banter. I can go on and on about stories where this has been problematic in professional settings. A colleague at an Ivy League university shared a story of what became known as the reply all apocalypse. An email was accidentally sent to a list of hundreds. People started to reply all, asking to be removed from the distribution. And then one person responded with a random fact and encouraged others to do the same. This went on and on. While some thought it was funny, many were incredibly annoyed. You can easily see how this might be damaging for the reputation of the person who sent that first email. But the worst is when you hit reply all on a negative message that was really intended for one person. Remember the example I started with of the boss who was leaving? Well, someone on the team accidentally hit reply all and responded with, "Thank goodness she's out of here," and then went on to state the things he didn't like about the manager. Yikes. Everyone in the company saw the message, and he had to write a second message to the whole list apologizing for that first unprofessional email. There are two lessons in that story. It's a cautionary tale about reply all and a reminder not to put things in email you wouldn't want everyone to read. You know the feeling. You open up your inbox after a day off and 349 unread messages. How do you prioritize? What needs your attention right away and what can wait until later? After you've read the messages from your boss, who or what do you go to next? Your readers are asking themselves these same questions when they open up their inbox. And that's why a well thought through subject line is so important. I've got 3 tips to help you craft a subject line that gets attention. Number 1, your subject line should summarize the content of your message. Vague subject lines are less likely to grab your reader's attention. Remember, they have a list of unread messages to respond to, and you want to quickly communicate your needs in a way that gets the result you need. Number 2, if your message requires action from the reader, specify that action in the subject line. Good business writing is clear and concise. The reader should know right away if you need something from them. If there's a quickly approaching deadline or if you need something specific, make that your headline. You can also indicate when you need your information in the subject line as well. Number 3, keep subject lines short. While you want to provide enough detail to show the reader what to expect, you don't want the subject line to get cut off because it has too many characters. Remember, your recipient may be reading on a mobile device, which will reduce the subject to fit on the screen. Let's apply these tips with an example. Let's say you need to send your team an email to let them know that your meeting time and place has changed. A vague subject line would be something like, "Our meeting," which forces the reader to open and read the whole message. But if instead you put the key information in the subject line, say, "Meeting moved to 3 p.m. in room 200, the recipient doesn't need to open your email to get the most important points of your message. If they have the time or interest, they may open the email to read the details you're including, like why the meeting time and place have changed. But if they don't need to know or don't have the time to read on, you've saved them those extra steps. Now, who wouldn't appreciate that? Miscommunication in email is often tied to cultural factors. But You can make it easier for your reader by providing some hints for how to best communicate with you. Let's talk about 3 strategies you can use to help your email recipients communicate comfortably with you and avoid embarrassing mistakes. First, include your preferred gender pronouns in your email signature. Generally, this is an inclusive communication practice that signals to others to do the same. This is also helpful because not all names indicate gender. I've encountered many students who share their frustration with people misattributing a gender to them. By including yours in your email messages, you help those who email you avoid embarrassing missteps by referring to you incorrectly. Second, write out the phonetic pronunciation of your name if it might be difficult for your recipients to pronounce. I have a Turkish friend whose name you see on the screen. Now, how would you pronounce that? If you're Turkish or have encountered someone with the same name before, you know it's pronounced Shara. Shara makes it easy for people who get emails from her by including the English pronunciation phonetically in her email signature. I don't regularly practice this, except when I'm emailing in specific global contexts. For example, the closest word to my name, Daisy, in the Korean language is the word for pig. Since I happen to speak Korean, I make sure to spell my name out phonetically in my email signature and on my teaching slides when I'm working in that cultural context. Finally, sign your email with the name you'd like the recipient to call you. The from line of your email account may show Michael, but if you prefer to be called Mike, make sure you sign your email messages that way. Similarly, if you expect the recipient to use a title when referring to you, it's helpful to sign your name that way. For example, it's common practice for physicians to sign emails to other physicians with their first name, but use doctor with their last name with everyone else. Signal to your reader what you want to be called by signing with your preferred name. This is also really helpful for people who go by their middle name or a nickname. So, what do you do if your email sender hasn't indicated these things for you? Go neutral on gender by using they or their, and write out their whole name without a gender pronoun in your greeting. These simple, yet often overlooked details will make it easier for people to communicate with you by email, especially across different cultures. At times, I love or hate the convenience of having my inbox at my fingertips 24/7. But writing and editing on my phone isn't nearly as easy as it is on a larger screen. When I do send emails from my phone, I'm more likely to find typos in messages I've sent, which is why I generally try to avoid it. On the one hand, minor typos may not be a big deal. But on the other hand, they can signal that you're careless, lazy, or don't pay attention to the details. And none of these are signals you want to be sending in a professional context. So, avoid drafting emails on your phone. But what else? Here are 3 quick tips for editing your email before you hit send. Autocorrect makes mistakes. Double check the spelling of names, especially the recipient of your email. You start off on the wrong foot when your message says Dear Jamal when it should have read Dear Jamar. I've seen autocorrect add an H to the name Sarah, and while some use H at the end of their name, not every Sarah does. Another tip is to reread your message and do it aloud if you can. There are times when your spelling may be accurate, but it's not quite the word you want to use. A colleague who teaches public speaking at a university in Europe told me her dean sent her a very awkwardly worded email to let her know that her email signature listed her as a professor of public speaking, but the L was missing in the word public. They both had a good laugh about it, but the situation was pretty embarrassing. You also want to double check words with multiple spellings. Examples such as there and to come to mind. For example, in the sentence on the screen, you can see a minor typo. This isn't something your spell check will necessarily pick up on. If you miss these little things in your emails, what other details are you missing in your work? Maybe none. But you don't want people asking these types of questions about you. Remember, you have no control over where your message ultimately goes. So, if you send a casual message with a few typos to a trusted colleague, but they forward the message to someone else, say because they have a question, your original message might misrepresent you to someone you don't know so well. Let me leave you with one last tip. If you are going to send email from a tablet or phone, studies show readers are more forgiving of errors in messages that contain the "sent from my smartphone" line in the signature. Knowing emails are an extension of your personal brand, it's worth it to take a little extra time to ensure you're grammatically putting your best foot forward. Here are my top 5 grammar tips for email. First, use the Oxford comma. This means when you have 3 or more details in a list, you use a comma before the conjunction. For example, this screen has a pink, purple, and gray circle on it. The second comma before the word "and" is the Oxford comma. Using it makes it easy for the reader to quickly understand your meaning. Now, if I remove the Oxford comma, the meaning is less clear. This screen has a pink, purple, and gray circle on it. This basic example shows how easily information can be made clearer with a comma. Second, write active sentences. In each sentence, readers should be able to picture the subject and the verb. This means I should be able to visualize what's happening and who's doing it. For example, Jamie missed the deadline on this project. In this sentence, the actor and action are clear. Most of business writing is active, but there are a few instances when you may want to use passive voice. For example, you may not want to call out Jamie in your email message. So, in that case, the passive version would read, "The deadline on this project was missed." This protects Jamie. Generally speaking, business writing is active, but strategically use passive voice when it makes sense for your situation. Third, avoid excessive punctuation. An exclamation point should be used for emphasis, but if you use them frequently, it reads like you're yelling. And there's no need to use more than one question mark or exclamation point. Fourth, maintain parallel structure in lists. This means if you start with past tense, everything listed afterwards should be in past tense. Or if you start with a verb, like the list I'm describing in this video, every item on your list should start with a verb. Finally, keep it simple. Never use 25 words when 15 will do. If you can cut the clutter in your sentences, your readers will have a clear idea of what you want them to understand. Want to be known for writing great email? Start by becoming a great conversationalist. A great conversationalist knows that their message is only as interesting or valuable as the audience thinks it is. So, if you come across as a know it all or confuse the listener, whatever you've said is pointless. It works the same in email. Business emails are not the place to show off how much you know about a topic. In fact, we want to be very careful about keeping emails simple and straightforward. One reason for this is email can very easily be misinterpreted. Another reason is your reader is likely distracted and juggling multiple priorities when they open your message. Here are some tips to keep a reader-friendly tone in your emails. Number 1, use simple language. There's no need to show off how advanced your vocabulary is. If you can use a $1 word, there's no reason to use a $10 one. Now, as someone who goes back and forth between academic and business settings, I can attest that clear and simple language is far more effective, especially in business settings. Number 2, avoid cliches, jargon, and buzzwords. If it wouldn't come across naturally in conversation, don't put it in your email. If I have to pause to look up the definition of something, I'm most likely going to put off your email till later. Number 3, use contractions. Now, this is probably something an English teacher told you not to do when you were in school. And if you were writing an academic paper, I wouldn't recommend it. But because business writing is conversational, some of the rules and practices are a bit different. Contractions are consistent with our everyday speaking patterns, and they help us economize on the number of words or characters you're using. Okay, I have one bonus tip for how to write an approachable email. Read your message out loud. Does it sound like you? Does it sound how you would sound if you were talking to a colleague at the coffee machine? If not, make adjustments. We're all busy, distracted, and short on time. That's why easily skimmed and digested emails have higher response rates. Here are some tips to format your emails in a reader-friendly manner. First, avoid all caps. Readers hear your voice when they read your email messages. If the text is in all caps, they literally hear you yelling in their minds as they read your message. So, it comes across as hostile. Need another reason to skip the all caps? Spell check doesn't catch errors written in uppercase because it assumes you're keying in acronyms or words with non-traditional spelling. And because it's harder to read, you'll easily miss the typos too. Second, don't use red font if you need to call your reader's attention to something. If you're responding, say, to questions in line, highlight your response in yellow and then use italics or bold. Red fonts are read as hostile and can have different meanings in other cultures. For example, writing a person's name in red ink is associated with death in Korean culture. Are you thinking, okay, Daisy, I'll use blue or green then? Well, that might be hard to read for someone who's colorblind, and these changes don't always show up on mobile devices. This is why I recommend using the highlight and italics features together when you're responding in line. Third, keep your sentences and paragraphs short. Remember, this is an email, not a thesis. If you find your content is long, use bulleted lists to make it easier for your reader to follow. Remember, people are reading your messages on a variety of devices, from smartwatches to large screens. Resist the urge to tell the reader everything you know about the topic, and just tell them what they need to know. Which brings me to another important point. Is all of the content you've included in your message related? If not, consider sending a separate email. By limiting the subjects of your messages, you help your readers stay focused on the key topic of your message. If you decide to keep the content together in one email, use bold subject headings to break up the sections or paragraphs in your message. This gives your reader a bit of a roadmap for your message and helps them refer back to specific sections when needed. Stick to these tips, and I promise you won't end up being that person who makes your colleagues roll their eyes when they see your name in their inbox. Most of our communication is nonverbal. When we speak to people face to face, we pay attention to their body language and tone of voice to get clues that help us decode their meaning. In emails, we have to search for clues that provide the subtext of the message. This is why written communication is tricky. Messages can easily be misunderstood and lead to distrust or frustration. So, how do you avoid this? By carefully drafting your email messages and striking the right tone with your readers. First, unless you are certain your audience shares your sense of humor, avoid sarcasm and jokes. It's easy for these things to be misunderstood or taken out of context. And even if it's amongst colleagues, you can't control where your messages end up. If you wouldn't be comfortable reading your email on the front page of a national newspaper, don't send it. It isn't worth the potential damage to your personal and professional reputation. Second, don't assume familiarity with your reader, especially if you're writing the person for the first time. Some individuals and organizations are hierarchical. The last thing you want to do is offend the recipient of your message by addressing them in a way that makes them feel disrespected. For example, many, but not all, physicians prefer to be addressed as doctor. If you send your message and include the title, the recipient will let you know if it's okay to call them by their first name. But if you assume familiarity and the person takes offense, it's hard to walk that back. You probably noticed a pretty casual greeting, "Hey," in my note as well. Wait to establish a working relationship before using informal greetings. Third, don't assume the gender of your recipient. Exclude it from your greeting and simply include the person's whole name if you're unsure how to address them. Just because your recipient has a name that you associate with a specific gender doesn't mean he or she identifies in that way. When you get this wrong, it's embarrassing and an unforced error. We're all going to make mistakes. We're human. But if you steer clear of these simple errors, you can be sure to strike the right tone in your business emails. There's a unique language that's regularly used in email, but some of those commonly used phrases have negative associations I want you to be aware of. Let's dive in. Number one, per our conversation or per my last email. The use of per sounds formal and has a bit of a paternal ring to it. It's basically saying, as you should know from our conversation or from my email. For example, if a student emails me a question that could be answered by reading my course syllabus, I have options for how I respond. One would be to simply answer their question. Another might be to give them a quick response and then refer them to my syllabus. A third response, which comes across as chastising the student, would be, per the syllabus, the policy is, and then paste the policy. Even if someone asks you a question that you've already answered or they should know how to respond to, it takes just as long to answer their question directly as it does to add the, sometimes interpreted as chastising, per to your answer. Just answer the question and then move on. If it becomes a regular issue, you can have a conversation with the person. Number two, simply stated, or to put it simply, this phrase can be heard as implying the person isn't smart enough to understand. An alternative is the short version. Number three, I'm not sure if you received my last message. This is basically saying, you haven't responded to my message in a timely manner, so I'm writing you again. Number four, just checking in. This also has an undertone of being impatient or implying you haven't received a response in a timely manner. I understand the impulse to use this when you want an update on something after time has lapsed. At best, this is weak language. It's better to be direct. If you're looking for an update, say that. On both of these last two, if your original email clearly stated when you needed a response, both in the subject line and in the body, another email probably won't do the trick. Try picking up the phone or stopping by their office. If the person has forgotten to respond or is behind, this will go over better than another email. Finally, use thanks in advance sparingly, if at all. If you've asked someone to do something in your message, they haven't had a chance to respond to you. So, this comes across as pushy or having assumed you're going to get the response you requested. We spend a lot of time on email. Well-meaning phrases can easily be misinterpreted. Avoid annoying your colleagues by using clear and direct language. Most of us approach our emails trying to be as efficient as possible. But I want to challenge you again to stop and think about your email as part of your personal brand. With that in mind, here are some common things you may want to stop doing since they generally annoy email readers. Sending unimportant messages as high priority. You want your most important messages to stand out. Save the flag for high importance if your email is actually urgent. Failing to update your out-of-office message. Letting people know that you won't be in the office is helpful, but sending unnecessary messages once you return isn't. Make sure you turn it off once you've returned to the office and double-check the dates before resetting it. Listing too much information in your email signature. You can create multiple versions of your email signature, one for external messages and another for internal messages. You can also specify if you want a shorter signature for replies and forwards. Forgetting attachments. Many email clients will let you know if you've forgotten to attach a document. So, slow down and confirm your attachments are linked. Sending huge files. Save large files to a cloud and include the link. And while we're on the subject of attachments, next on my list is labeling attachments unclearly. Make sure you've given your attachments descriptive names and attach them in the order you've referenced them in your email. If I'm writing letters of recommendation, I can easily find a file labeled jsmithresume.doc, but would have to open multiple files named resume.doc. Remember, documents you send live beyond the inbox. Make it easy for your reader to find them on their desktop by clearly labeling them. Forwarding messages without reading everything. You're responsible for the messages you send, even if you didn't write all of their contents. If you aren't going to take the time to read everything, delete the history before you forward the message. Responding to messages without reading the entire chain. Say you've been in meetings all morning and you've missed a bunch of emails from your team. Read everything in the chain before you respond to the thread. Using text speak in business emails. This last one can vary based on your relationship with the recipient. As a general rule, avoid using text lingo in professional emails. Remember, you don't have any control over where your message ultimately ends up. According to a study by McKinsey, the average worker spends about 2.6 hours on email per day. That's 13 hours a week, or more than 600 hours a year. And guess what? We can't get that time back. But we can make email less painful and more effective by being professional and courteous of our recipients' time. That's what most of these tips boil down to, creating a great personal brand by respecting others' time. Thanks for making the time to join me in this discussion of best practices for professional emails. Now that you've invested in your own professional development, you can start putting these practices to good use and send your colleagues my way. I have several other courses in the library that will help you become a more effective communicator. Feel free to post questions about this or any other course in the Q&A feed and connect with me on LinkedIn. Until then, I wish you well and happy emailing.